And we are live, Benji.
Oh, wait, don't do it.
Too late. Put your shirt on.
Dang it.
All right. So, this is going to be a fun episode for us. We are talking about why you need Elixir in your lives. And we're going to walk through a little bit of history. And then we're going to basically just talk about why it's our go to choice for our tech stack when we build most of our projects.
Yep.
The end. All right,
Very
guys.
deep
So
input.
you should use it. But I guess like what I
Right,
can start
that's a wrap.
off. So Elixir is based off of Erlang, and Erlang was created in 1986. So before Ben was even born, by Ericsson, and they needed it to solve telecommunication problems with concurrency and fault tolerance challenges that they ran into with phone systems. And so Erlang was designed to handle just massive concurrency and provide the fault tolerance for building just robust and scalable systems. So like, a whole ton of like voice channel processes would when it like crash an entire server, you could just like maybe drop a call, and so that's
And
kind
see,
of
if Jacob was built on Elixir, then that lag wouldn't have just happened.
it would not have
There you
happened.
go.
But I only use Elixir and I only hope to be fully integrated someday. And so
Just wait until Elixir is running on Elon Musk's brain chip.
ooh. So Erlang runs on a thing called the Beam, which is a virtual machine, and it's known for lightweight processes, efficient memory management, and the ability to handle high concurrency. And so from that, Elixir was born quite a few
Yeah.
years later. So I just had a fun podcast with Jose Valum on my Elixir Mentor podcast, celebrating 12 years of Elixir. So that's exciting.
Yeah. So obviously Elixir came much later than that. Jacob didn't get into it until recently, but he was around when Erlang was originally written, so he probably helped with that.
Yes, I was.
You were like 5 or 6 by then, right?
Whoa, time out. I was 1 year old. Okay. But yes, I did help. I helped create it.
Perfect. That's what I thought.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Elixir was built much later. But it builds upon that solid foundation of Erlang and the BEAM VM. And it's really just an extension of that in the form of a language. And it brings a lot of modern and expressive syntax that's similar to Ruby. And if you've ever heard of Ruby or Ruby on Rails, it's pretty close to that. And it makes it a lot more accessible to developers. And that's why in the Elixir community, there's actually a whole lot of people who have come directly from Ruby, is because it was the next logical step, because Ruby on Rails has kind of fallen by the wayside as far as popularity goes.
So,
Um,
not to interrupt you, but Ben has known how awesome Elixir is from like what I've told him, and obviously he sees the performance. But just recently, I got him into Phoenix LiveView, and he's starting to
well, it's
write.
because we're rewriting our front end,
I
our
know,
website,
but
and we
like,
decided it needs to be in live view because that's what we're doing. And so I finally bit the bullet and said, "Fine, I will do your work for you, and I will do live view."
and how much do you love it?
On a scale of 1 to 10, probably a 2.
That's all. But
Just kidding.
everything else in Ben's life is negative numbers.
No, it's fantastic so far, and I
Like
really
it's
like live
it's
view.
it's fun to
It,
write, isn't it?
it's fun to write and it's clean. Like there's a lot of things where in JavaScript it's this long, expressive, nasty functions calling functions, such as formatting currency in Svelte and in all the front end frameworks. You either have to implement a whole function you have to call, or you have to write this long string that gets interpolated. to translate the numbers into strings and then into concurrency or whatever you're doing. And the piping in Elixir is really nice, and it made it really clean, and it was just one line that I could read really easy. And that's one of the big perks for me, is the readability, because it's so much more readable than JavaScript, in my opinion.
I agree. And how do you feel? Do you find moving from like an OO language to a functional language, like with the mutability and immutability, difficult, or did you pick it up pretty easily?
Well, for me personally, I was already moving that direction because Rust, and
That's true. You've been in
Rust
the
is
Rust
not,
world.
yeah, Rust is not object oriented, and I'm good with that. In fact, that's one of the benefits of things like ECS is it's not object oriented. And so I had already like made that mental switch, and so it wasn't too bad, but it's not as hard as people think it is when they first get started. That is something that I ran into when I was moving into Rust originally. Was I'm used to OO. I was trained on C++ and everything's object oriented, and college was C++ and Java and JavaScript. I don't think I ever did Python. I think there was a little bit of Lisp, but it was mostly Java and JavaScript and C++.
The only
C++
Python I
was
ever,
actually the only Python you.
I was going to say, the only Python I ever wrote was for like a Bitcoin like course that I
Yeah.
took.
Yeah, I've done a little bit of Python. I don't love it. But anyways, my first language was C++ because that's how college was doing it. But
That's way better than Java, I'll tell you that.
yeah, Java, we got introduced to Java like when I was a sophomore or a junior. And by then I'm sitting there looking at Java and I'm like, what is this nasty? But anyways, totally off topic. My point was moving from that object-oriented background into functional. There was a little bit of brain tweaking that had to go on, like reframing how I thought about things. But once you do, it's really nice.
Yeah,
And
I remember it was hard for me. Like I was trying to force everything to work like an object-oriented language. And then when you finally like let go and get used to it, it becomes a much cleaner way of writing code.
oh yeah, for sure. And especially when it comes time to do things like write tests and debug just in general, functional languages are far superior because you don't have all of the weird stuff that can happen with objects, such as something somewhere is mutating your data and you have no idea why. And so you're passing in this object and something's mutating it down the line in a function that's getting called. And it just, things get thrown off. It's hard to maintain. Object-oriented programming is great for modeling and such. It's an easy way to grasp how things should work because it interacts with our existing knowledge of, hey, I have a desk and these are the properties that are associated to a desk. Or I have a computer and these are the properties that are associated to a computer, and this is my computer. So it's easy to grasp that concept, but moving on to functional programming makes in my opinion, it makes life a lot better.
Yeah, you don't have any nasty state issues.
Yeah.
Because like the worst thing you're going to have to do is decide what value is the correct value to persist if you do have state being, or like if you have a value being transformed by different functions throughout. Like I don't know, because normally like if you're transforming something, you pipe it, right? So everything's happening in order, so you know exactly where everything's happening.
Well, and you can see those breaks, and it's really, like I said, it's really easy to read.
Yeah.
When it comes to piping, it's, hey, I've got this function, and then I've got I forget the name for the straight line, but the straight line and then an angle bracket.
The cons operator.
Passing it into the next one, and it just goes down the chain, and you can, in the code, you can see a visible chain of events.
I always call the cons operator the pipe, and I don't like, because it is also called the pipe, but I don't like saying that because it's part of the pipe operator. Like when I'm teaching Elixir, I feel like it doesn't
Hmm.
make sense. So
Yeah, that's
I
fair.
always have to have cons operator in my head, or I say things like the pipe operator and confuse people.
That's fair. But I like the readability. I like the functional aspect of it. And it's easy to debug, it's easy to use, it's easy to read, it's easy to write. And there are a lot of things in there that just make sense from the programming side of
Yeah.
things.
So
So if
at
you take
H,
all of those benefits of the Beam and the Beam VM and all of that stuff and adding a whole lot of modern syntax, a whole lot of modern features, that nice clean code that we've been talking about, it leverages all of the Beam VM strengths, and including concurrency, which is a huge selling point, and the fault tolerance. And it
yeah.
gives you an easy access point to leverage that.
Yeah. So at HGA, we get a lot of jobs across our desks, and we don't, it's rare we don't stick to the PETL stack, which is our tech stack. And that stands for it's Phoenix, Elixir, Tailwind CSS, and LiveView. And then we use Postgres for, our database. And I'm not a huge fan of the PETL acronym.
Jacob
And
doesn't care for this flowery language.
no, it annoys me. I don't know why I don't like it. So I'm gonna probably just call it like our Elixir stack throughout this episode because I don't like pedal, and it's PETL. But there are a lot, like I think it was more common before Phoenix 1.7. A lot of people would bring like Alpine JS in, and they'd throw an A in there, so it'd be PETAL, and yeah,
That makes sense. I mean, Alpine is a really nice, super lightweight JavaScript framework. And it's not uncommon for people to pull that in, especially in server-side rendered languages, because it gives you a lot of the benefits of modern frameworks like React, Vue, Svelte, Angular.
yeah. So like if you
Oh,
need a little
but
bit of client side state, you would use something like Alpine.
yeah, it's kind of the same concept as I'm blanking the name of the distro. There's a Linux distro that people it might be Alpine too. I don't remember. I'm blanking it. Anyways, there's a Linux distro that people will often install on their cloud VMs and stuff because it's super lightweight, super small package size, and it just gives you the basics for CLI stuff that they need. And so it's that same idea of I want a lot of the power and a lot of the functionality, but I don't want to bloat all of my front end with a whole framework, and I don't want to mess with things like integrating server-side rendering into the React lifetimes and all of that stuff,
Yeah,
where things can get really muddy and nasty. And so Alpine helps manage that. So I can
that
see
makes
why they
sense.
do that.
All right, let's rewind a little bit. Let's go back to the P of pedal. So Phoenix is a web framework that is built with Elixir, and it just provides like a productive, scalable foundation for building web applications. And then you have your Tailwind, which is utility first CSS framework that offers, predefined classes for building, custom user interfaces. And then we have LiveView, which is a library for creating the real-time interactive like web applications that, without needing to write extensive amount of JavaScript code. You really are only using JavaScript for, page transitions, maybe light amount of client side state, depending on what your project's doing. But
Well, and I'm like in our website that I'm in the middle of rebuilding. I should be done with the skeleton like today. But anyways, you can also pull in some UI libraries and such that are JavaScript heavy. I'm pulling one in called Ripple, and it makes things really nice. And so you might use a little bit of JavaScript for that, but it drastically cuts down on the JavaScript that you need to use. So you can
yeah,
still, that was one of my concerns going in was, are there going to be issues with trying to use JavaScript with this server-side rendered language? And It's really nice. It works really well. Everything runs super smooth. And because a lot of the rendering power is taken off of the JavaScript that's normally running in a web framework, it makes your website a lot faster. And a lot of things that were kind of, I used the same library in Svelte a couple of times. And a lot of the things that were kind of janky and jittery aren't in what we're building right now.
Nice. Like a good reason why we're rewriting HGA's site is because I wrote Elixir Mentor's website in LiveView, and Ben just saw the amazing performance over HGA's site.
If I'm being honest, it pissed me off a little bit.
Ooh, I loved it.
Svelte and SvelteKit in the JavaScript framework land are fast. Like if you look at benchmarks, Svelte is just so freaking fast. And that's because it's a compiled framework rather than a runtime driven framework. And so a lot of that, the same idea of server-side rendering, in fact, SvelteKit, which is the base package for Svelte, like if you install Svelte right now, if you create a Svelte app, you're using SvelteKit by default. Anyways, it's designed to be mostly server-side rendered. And so Svelte is fast. And that's one of the reasons why I went with Svelte and I liked Svelte, aside from a lot of the convenience and clean syntax and stuff. But so writing a whole bunch of Svelte and being happy with, oh, it's fast. And then Jacob throws up his Elixir Mentor website and he goes, check it out. And I pop it open and it loads. And we ran some benchmarks and it was like half the time of my SvelteKit app.
And
I was just like, this makes me so angry.
So not only does it load faster, you also get better like SEO results because the pages are always there when you get crawled by the Google bots.
Yeah, and you get that by default. SEO is a really tricky problem with existing web frameworks that are client-side driven. Even in SvelteKit, you have to do a whole bunch of weird stuff and set up specific properties and such to make sure that you have some of that data available, and it doesn't always work. It exists. It's absolutely not perfect. And so it's a major problem because those bots that are running through and running all the SEO stuff, yes, there are things you can do. You can provide robots.txt and all kinds of stuff, but by default, out of the box, they're not waiting for your app to load. They're just hitting it, seeing what they get, and move on. And so since it's server-side rendered and it's available so quickly, by default, which is the key operator here, SEO just works a lot better with SSR frameworks like Phoenix.
You know, what's amazing is like HGA doesn't show up well on like Google search results. Like I get a lot of emails, right? So like monthly emails from Google. And what's cool is with like Elixir Mentor, just like the last month or two, I'm starting to like be like, hey, 40 people found you through Google search results. And like things like that are really cool. And my site has been up, what, 6 months? Yeah. I don't remember when I wrote it, but like, I think that's cool. And that's just a testament to how well server-side rendered pages work for you.
Yeah. So,
and I know I just said a number that's not that big, but like Elixir Mentor is not that big a thing yet.
Okay. So your site has been up for, I don't even think it's been 6 months, but
it might not.
It hasn't been up very long. You don't have a lot of the stuff going like blog posts and all that stuff, which I know you're implementing right now.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of the typical SEO stuff is just not there. And what's good about the numbers that you're saying is this is out of the box stuff with no effort on your end to improve SEO, to be hitting all of the benchmarks, to be doing everything that Google wants you to be doing to build good SEO. This is just, you built a Phoenix site, you threw it up there, and you're getting traffic coming in.
Yeah. And I mean, like, don't get me wrong, I filled in all my meta tags and, you know, all the crap you're supposed to do. But it's still pretty
Well, yeah, but
cool.
that's baseline.
That is.
Like I followed a tutorial and it said to throw in meta tags
Hey,
stuff.
don't judge me how I knew to do that.
I judge you every day, Jacob. Um,
So yeah, one cool thing. So I know I'm jumping ahead, and we'll talk about some examples shortly, but the amount of development and kind of like what's the word I'm looking for? Like kind of like prototyping and like proving your point very quickly. You can iterate very fast with Elixir with a very small team because like you can have a one-man team and you have an awesome full stack, web application that's responsive, it works well, has like real-time updates. But anyways, like so I just interviewed Zach Daniel last Friday. He's the author of the Ash framework.
yeah,
And
I was gonna say, like, if you pull in frameworks like Ash, then that small team and getting a whole lot done and
yeah,
iterating is just even faster.
yeah, and I never really understood the benefits. I didn't take the time to really learn what the Ash framework was all about. And after I had Zach on, I was like, dude, this is so cool. I need to play around with it. Like I'm going to be making, some tutorials with it as well. But so I just started messing around with it yesterday. And I am 85%, 90% done with implementing blog posts where I have an admin panel where I can edit and create them.
That's dope.
And I did it all in just a couple hours. And like, now remember, this is me also learning Ash framework. So like I'm going in knowing nothing and I almost have an entire blog system set up on my website now.
Yeah. Well, and one of the big important points about this for me personally is we're probably going to get a lot of people that go, well, with WordPress, I have a blog set up out of the box, blah, blah, blah. But because it's built in Elixir and it's purely code driven, we're writing everything. Yes, you're using a framework, which is what Ash is, but it gives you so much control that you can customize anything you want. It's just giving you the tools to move fast. And a lot of the benefits of Elixir aren't upfront. If you want a landing page and that's all you want, you can pop up a Wix template and you're done in an hour instead of having to write it in Elixir and all that stuff. However, the benefits come farther down the road, and it comes from the level of control that you have, the customizability of everything that you're writing, the ability to pivot really quickly. A lot of the BEAM VM's benefits like fault tolerance, concurrency, all of that stuff. I see all the time these storefronts and stuff that are built on Wix or WordPress or Shopify, and they get set up and then they go viral. There was one actually that I'm thinking of in particular called Nugget, and they basically make these little foam playground things for children. And back when my daughter was like 1 or 2 was when they started to go viral and get really popular. And you're now seeing like knockoffs of it in Costco and stuff. But anyways, they had a site that was set up on Shopify. They went viral and they had so many problems that their site was crashing anytime they did a release, and it was a nightmare. And they kept looking into what can we do to fix this, and they ended up spending a lot of money to try to optimize their Shopify site and all kinds of stuff. There was a whole lot of drama online from all these people who were waiting in the queue, who had stuff in their carts and then it disappeared or the website crashed. And all of that stuff down the road is fixed by using Elixir.
Yeah, because everyone that visits your website, they see your views, they are in their own process. So if anything even goes wrong with their process, they're the only ones that crash. And
Yes.
then it automatically restarts because that is just how awesome Erlang is. Or I should say, I don't know, it's Beam. Beam reboots its processes, and you can have strategies set behind all your processes, how they function and how they work. So if you have something that's crashing, it will automatically restart and it won't affect, it'll be more of a lag versus a system failure.
Yeah.
And
And
so
so
like,
there are a lot of benefits there. And that's that's one of the things that I love about what we're doing, is it's this really strong combination of Elixir's concurrency, fault tolerance, Phoenix's productivity, especially when you involve Ash and stuff like that. And then you can pull in like Tailwind, because that is really rapid for UI development. And you get a lot of these really modern things that are common in today's web development. And you have that available to you via Elixir, and you get all of those benefits. And it's just really, it's a really powerful combination. The PETL stack is really great. And as somebody who's been using the typical front-end web frameworks for years, almost a decade, moving to Elixir and using the PETL stack is just really refreshing and comforting, because I know that a lot of the problems that I've run into in the past just don't exist. And that's one of the things I love about Elixir. There was a tweet that I saw forever ago where somebody was trying to make this big post on LinkedIn about, you don't have Google's problems, blah, blah, blah. You don't need to worry about scaling. You don't need to worry. And they were trying to really exude that big brain energy. And
I love big brain energy. I just need it. I need it all.
somebody commented, and they're like, well, if you're using Elixir, you're right, you don't have Google's problems.
That's
And
right.
it was just like, that's perfection. Because just the
Yeah.
versatility of the stack and of Elixir's capabilities and its ability to handle various use cases just make it a really powerful choice for web development, even if you've gotten really comfortable using React or Svelte or Angular or Vue or Meteor or one of the 900 client-side frameworks out there.
Yeah. And I know we've talked about this as an example a lot. We always bring up Bleacher Report because I think it's a cool project, right? They moved from I think they moved from Ruby, right?
I think so. I think
And
originally it was written in Ruby.
so they migrated everything over to Elixir on their backend servers, and they ended up reducing their server load, like their server cost, by 95%. They went from like, I think just for like math's sake, they went from 100 servers to 5 servers. And that just shows you how awesome like the Beam VM's ability to handle the high concurrency played a role in just like cost savings alone from like the DevOps standpoint.
Well, and that's a huge win for any business, because you're drastically reducing those costs. And what's crazy to me is it was written in Ruby, which is supposedly more performant than like Node.js. So you're taking an already performant thing and you just swapped it to Elixir, and you drastically improve performance just by the switch. And from what I was reading in the past, it's not like they had a team of Elixir experts.
No, they were
This
all
whole
learning
swap
it.
was going
Yeah.
on while they were learning Elixir. And so
Yeah.
that's just crazy to me.
Yeah, really crazy, honestly. And I was like a little sad because about like 6 months ago or maybe longer, I heard that they were shifting away from OTP and Elixir in general. And I was like, why? What is the reason for this? And I started digging into it, and I ended up finding a Reddit post, and I don't know if it's like a legitimate thing, but they were talking about it. There was a whole thread, and there was one person that posted saying that he worked there, and it all ended up being like non-technical people and political BS that is like pushing the Elixir tech out of their stack.
Well, that doesn't surprise me at all, because what typically happens for, especially in bigger companies, is they pull in somebody who is their new CTO or whatever. They're changing middle management or upper management, and this person has tons of experience in this one framework or this one language, typically Node.js, because that's one of the most popular options for backends for web development. And so they
Gross.
see things through. Yeah, I don't agree with it. I'm just saying
It
those
used
are
to
the
be the
numbers.
only thing I knew and understood, and I like kind of just thought I was like, "Oh, it's the only option. This is what everyone does."
It's meanwhile I was laughing in C++. But but anyways, so you'll have these people come in and this is all they know. And so they come in to fix it and they're like, well, we're going to switch everything to Node.js and we're going to use AWS and we're going to use microservices. And I don't care because synergy or insert buzzword here,
Yeah.
because what it really is they're afraid of the tech that they don't understand and they don't want to learn anything.
Yeah. There was
And
actually just,
especially there are some senior devs who do not fall into this category. So don't come at me with not all blah blah blah, because I recognize they exist and I hope that as I progress in my career I'm one of the exceptions.
I don't
But a lot
know.
of
Like you're
senior
just
devs,
getting crankier and crankier the older you get, you know? I think you'll get more and more stuck in your ways.
yeah, that's why I'm in the middle of learning a game engine that isn't even battle tested yet and has like zero. Okay, there's one game released in it that's commercial.
Oh, wow. You're a poser. You're not even cool.
Yep. But that's because I'm stuck in my ways and taking the easy route.
Well, I'm just saying it's going to get worse and worse each year.
Anyways, a lot of
You're
senior
flying
devs
you're
get
flying by the
stuck
seat of your
in
pants
whatever.
right now.
Oh, shut up. A lot of senior devs get stuck in their ways and they don't want to learn anything because learning's hard. And so with the Bleacher Report stuff, it doesn't surprise me. Hey, we had a change in management and they came in, they didn't get this whole Elixir thing. And so they said, scrap it. We're going to rewrite it in something I know so that I can measure everything and micromanage.
Yeah, and I was reading that like they're pulling in like Rust and like a lot of Node.js stuff, but everything that they're writing isn't performing as good as what they're replacing. And they're still like, well, it'll get there. Like, oh, okay. Just like keep
Uh-huh.
switching to JavaScript, it'll get there.
The Rust side of things, like switching over to Rust, I have no qualms with, because performance wise for heavy duty tasks, Rust is superior to Elixir. And that's
Mm-hmm.
why we've talked about it a few times. A lot of companies, including Discord, have an Elixir backend to handle all the concurrency, all the fault tolerant stuff. It's great at parallelism. So, you know, super responsive. But when you have heavier duty tasks that Elixir isn't as performant in, just because of the nature of the beast, because there's a tool for every job and those are Elixir's strengths. Doing heavy duty calculations is not in Elixir's strengths.
Yeah, and Chris just made a comment. He made a really good point. The core of it is they want to make their devs more replaceable. They can pull in Node.js devs from everywhere for a dime a
Yeah,
dozen.
sorry, I was going to make that point. I've completely spaced it.
Yeah.
Elixir is more of a niche thing, and a lot of US based companies are moving more towards outsourcing to Mexico and India, which no shade at developers from those countries, but by and large there's a definitive performance gap and a code quality gap. And
Mm-hmm.
in today's environment in our ecosystem, a lot of companies are trying to move to AI code and seeing what all they can generate with AI to get rid of developers and cut out engineers and cut out those salaries. Again, absolutely don't agree with that, because every piece of AI code I've ever seen is mid at best. It's not great. And
Mm-hmm.
it comes with inherent problems. I've seen AI generated. There there was an article I was reading. Somebody decided to generate a whole bunch of security stuff for their server with AI, and it went about as well as you would expect. And they had so many security problems. But anyways, there's
Dude,
tons of
I
training data available for Node.js and for those more popular web frameworks, because the numbers are there for people writing code. Whereas with Elixir, there's not as much publicly available data for them to scrape and train on. And so that's another facet is outsourcing to other countries, outsourcing to AI, it's a lot easier to do with Node.js and more popular backend frameworks.
I tried to embrace like Cursor and like some of the AI IDEs. I was like, okay, I'll try to flex this as a tool. I've stopped using them all because I actually found it was taking away from my efficiency in writing or proficiency because I was busy looking at crappy code and just fixing it. And I was like, why am I doing this? It's like copying and pasting a bad solution from Stack Overflow and then fixing it to be a good solution.
Well, that's what you're doing.
That's true.
I didn't want to be the old man yelling at the windmill. Like, you know, I installed a couple of different AI coding tools just to check them out, to give them a fair shot. And I tried using them for like a month. And the one that I found worked the best for me was, I think was called Codium.
Yeah,
But
Codium. That's what I was using.
I ended up uninstalling it and I just don't use them because everything gets super opinionated. It has that fuzzy logic issue that you'll find with any kind of AI generated content where, hey, you asked ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, insert whatever Fabric, whatever AI you want to use. You ask it a question and you end up having to go verify the results. Because when it doesn't know something, it makes shit up. And the AI code stuff was popping out code that didn't even compile. And so I was spending so much time debugging and figuring out, hey, why isn't this working? And cleaning up the code to make it readable because it's trained off of, I actually got a LinkedIn message maybe 4 or 5 months ago where somebody was looking for developers who wanted to make money on the side, training AI tools. And they were offering $25 an hour to write code to train AI tools.
So imagine the quality.
The first thought that came across my mind was, what kind of developers are writing the training code for these AI systems that are willing and eager to take $25 an hour?
Developers that are also using AI to code for them for the AI training.
Like, it's
all right, we have to get off the AI rant.
Total tangent. The original point was that's part of the reason why people move over to Node.js and why the whole Bleacher Report thing happened was it's easier to outsource to whatever you want to outsource to. That was the point.
Yeah. And so now what originally got us in the Elixir world was we started a fitness marketplace called Perfect Form. And
so Perfect Form was a fitness marketplace that we originally built using the PETL stack, and we were using Vue for the front end, and it was a PWA. We were doing a lot of experimental stuff with it. But the whole point was allowing trainers to post workout plans and stream exercise videos. So it was kind of, just to quickly convey the general idea, it was kind of like a Udemy or one of those course platforms, but specifically focused on exercise and fitness and providing tools to help with that. And so the PETL stack handled a lot of the concurrent streaming and user interactions, and it was pretty flawless, honestly, in Perfect Form. The front end had some issues because PWAs and Safari and Vue and all of that stuff, but the back end was solid. And a lot of that was from LiveView's real-time capabilities, and it provided this really seamless user experience in Perfect Form. And Elixir and the BEAM VM were hard at work ensuring high performance and fault tolerance, all of those great things that are really important, especially when you have an app that ends up needing offline capabilities and like spotty connections and all that stuff that comes in. It gets involved when you're using something that is mobile by default. Because the main focus was we wanted a mobile app. We were doing a PWA, but you also get a lot of issues like inconsistent cell phone connections and all that stuff. And Elixir really helped manage that really well.
Yeah, like between just like we had a chat system that we integrated and just using like channels and pub sub. Channels are essentially just sockets, right? And like our chat system was flawless. The ability to pull up I want to call them courses, but the ability to pull up workouts and things, like everything was flawless. And like streaming and keeping track of your progress, all that stuff, it just worked perfectly. And really, our only issues were the fact we were trying to make a PWA. Like, if we just created native apps and bowed down to the App Store gods, it would have probably been a fantastic workout app and marketplace.
Yeah, but that's a whole separate discussion. There are
That
lots of
is.
issues there, and Apple's killing PWAs right now, is what they're
Yep.
doing. And
It's
we
their
came in at the
job.
wrong time.
Yep. Well, and I mean, just recently, it's even been more attacked.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a big
That's
believer of web applications over native apps. If you can make a mobile first web app, do that 1,000% before you even consider building mobile apps, unless you absolutely need to.
Yeah. I mean, I'm using for a client that I have right now, I'm using something called Capacitor. And basically what it is it's a web wrapper that'll wrap whatever website you have. So you can use literally anything and just install Capacitor and wrap it in Capacitor, and you have access to most of the native functionalities, most of everything that you need, and you can compile actual APK and app bundles for Android. And I'm blanking the name of the package for iOS, but you can create native applications in it that are just web view wrappers over your website. And it's kind of like React Native. I feel like it's a lot better, in my opinion, because React Native gets really opinionated about things and forces you to use their components, and you run into a lot of bugs and all that stuff. And the performance isn't great. But like, I'm using it in a Svelte app and then wrapping it in Capacitor, and I have a web app that I can just easily pump out to iOS and Android. And so I can create my PWA, have that be the primary thing, and then make an Android and an iOS if I have to. But it's all utilizing web tech, and I don't have to go write all of the specific native stuff that comes with, hey, I want a full native app.
Yeah.
And my experience thus far has been fantastic with that. And I'd really recommend, if you want native apps, if you want to deploy apps to native platforms like that, look at something like that, because it saves you a lot in dev costs and headaches and all that stuff. Because one of the big keys is, well, when you're writing for mobile, you have to do multiple screen sizes. And that's one of the big arguments in the native communities for development is, well, iOS, we have this limited subset of devices. In Android, there's like 465 different screen sizes you got to manage. And in web, you just have to manage like everything. And that's the default mindset. And web technologies are built around, hey, how do we easily manage all this stuff? And so you can leverage that and write your web app and have a native app for iOS and Android out of the box, just ready to go.
Yeah, no, I love that. And really, it's very there. It's a small edge case if you need native, right? You'd have to be leveraging cutting edge things like maybe some VR stuff, AR stuff.
Well, and for
Maybe
that, I'd recommend a game engine anyways.
that's true.
But
That is
one of the
true.
things that you can do, the reason I brought this whole thing up is I'm using Svelte for it because I need offline capability. And I can do that in Svelte, and LiveView you can't.
Yeah.
But if you're looking to build something where offline, like that is a hard requirement for that app, people are going outside of cell reception and doing work all of the time. And so I have to. And when I say
Time
I have
out
to, it
though.
means I have to.
There are cool projects pumping into the Elixir world. So there is Live Svelte by Wout, and one of my podcast guests was Tony Dang, and he actually implemented LiveSpelt with YJS, I believe, and he like kept local state syncing with server state for like a to-do list app that had offline support. Really cool stuff.
Nice.
I recommend checking out my Wout interview and my Tony Dang interview in that order, and then go watch Tony like walk through his app on his YouTube channel. It's really cool. I mean, there's a lot of work that he laid down to make it work, but it's cool to see that progress.
Yeah, it's the first iteration of it, and as time goes on and as work goes into it, it'll become easier and easier and more streamlined to use that. It's just not there yet for me for a client project.
Oh, for sure. I get that.
But but what I was going to say is if offline capability isn't a requirement and you can make it work, and even with like live spelt, even if you have, hey, here's a simplistic view that says, hey, you're offline or whatever, or you can use the thinking capabilities. I think live view would be a fantastic thing to wrap inside of capacitor. And now you're building full on natively available web apps in Elixir.
Heck yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that's a fantastic thing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's cool. I love that. Look at this. Pretty much Elixir and LiveView and Phoenix. They're just amazing. They're perfect.
Yeah.
They're our
I mean,
perfect little children.
I really like it's a really good balance between performance and interactivity with live view. That's one of the things that I'm noticing is everything that is on our landing page that I'm rebuilding and playing around with things on the side while I was learning to use live view. It's all fast, it's all reactive, and it's super powerful.
Well,
And it
you get the full, like the slowest load is your first load, right? Because you're getting
mhm.
all your HTML in one go. And then
Well,
once
even
that's,
then, it's all kind of broken up. Like what I've noticed is when it's loading a huge project, you'll get like an initial view that has most of the stuff there, and then it follows up with another display with another render
yeah,
essentially on the
when your
socket.
socket connection hits, you get another full render, and then from that point forward, you're just updating the dynamic values. So like it's just so much faster because you're just handing over, a handful of variables that need to be updated. Sorry if you guys can hear that. There's like a weed whacker right outside my door. But yeah, so you're just like you're updating a lot smaller pack like.
Somebody's trying to weed whack their way into your apartment.
Because correct me if I'm wrong, when you're doing server side rendering with like React or Svelte even, you're rendering the full component over and over again, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
So
there's no socket going on. It's just pure SSR. And so you're hitting your backend and saying, hey, I need a new render of the page. And so it's sending you the full render over and over and over again. And a lot of the stuff, it's pretty fast because any assets or things like that have already been loaded. And so it's just looking for changes in the DOM. But looking at the networking stuff for at least SvelteKit, because that's the one that I've mostly been using. I haven't used React in a while, so maybe it's changed. But at least with SvelteKit, there's no sockets going on. A lot of the power that comes from Elixir and LiveView. Okay. Okay, perfect. I was finally hearing the weed whacker. But but anyways, a lot of the power that comes from LiveView isn't available in SvelteKit and Nuxt. Yeah, that's where the server side rendering comes in with Vue. Is there's a framework called Nuxt. It wasn't there in Nuxt, and so it's really cool to see. Hey, I just need to update this input that I'm working on, and so the only thing that's changing is the input, and that's super fast. So there's a whole lot of power that comes from it. There's a lot of really cool tooling that exists that just makes life easier, makes your page a lot more responsive in the long run than typical frameworks. And it's really cool because it's 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 as fast I don't want to say as fast because I'm sure there's like a millisecond difference or something, but it's about as fast as a statically rendered HTML page because that's what you're getting. But you have a lot of that interactivity and a lot of the things that you see in older websites and statically generated websites where, like, for example, I've got a contact form and I want to submit it. I press the submit button and you see the whole page reload. That doesn't happen in LiveView. So it feels like a modern web app, but it's giving you the speed and the strength of, here's my statically rendered HTML site with high SEO, with super quick rendering speed. It's really, really nice. And those real-time capabilities are fantastic. They're great for building landing pages, for static pages, for full-on dynamic web applications. That's another really strong point of Elixir. And you don't need to write a whole lot of complex JavaScript code. And like I was saying earlier, coming from a JavaScript background and using a lot of JavaScript, I've been using Elixir for like a week, and it's making my life a lot easier. The code's a lot cleaner, and I'm a lot happier writing it than
That's because
fighting
it
JavaScript.
that's because it's just sexy. Like, if anything, if you want to just be sexier, write an Elixir.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, it's like take your collagen, work out, and write an Elixir.
Exactly, and you'll be sexy. What I really like seeing too, what's really cool. So my Discord server for Elixir Mentor, someone just shared an article today. It was written back in like 2021, but it's like relevant. It's cool to see projects like this, and it's about X-Plane, which is like a flight simulator. And I was reading this article, and basically they wanted a here. I'll pull it up. Actually, I can share it on my screen. Let's see. Ooh, this is scary. Sharing our screen on Big App Energy. This is a first. So it's a really cool article, and it basically goes on to say they were trying to figure out how to have like a multiplayer experience where they could have like 10,000 users in the same session, all like in a flight simulator flying. And they built this in 6 months. And they were all relatively new to Elixir. So, like, kind of same thing with Bleacher Report. They're learning Elixir and how it works. And they wrote this game server in 6 months, and they were beta testing in 5, which I think is pretty cool. And so, yeah, their goal was just to have like soft real time and have 10,000 people playing. And when they released it, they had almost all positive feedback. Like, there were no issues with this. And this article is awesome. I can share it in the description notes, but pretty much they had North America was powered by a single server on an 8-core machine with 16 gigabytes of memory. Sorry. And only 300 megabytes of memory was being used. And every player was sending updates, 10 updates per second.
That's insane.
So, like, that is so dope, and that's exciting. So, like, I'm glad this article is shared today because, like, I was like, oh, we're doing our why we chose Elixir podcast.
Well, and we've seen articles in the past. There was some, I don't remember what kind of game they were writing,
Yeah.
but they were writing some form of MMO, and they were using Elixir for their backend just as a, hey, we want to do something different. And what they found was, yes, sometimes the pings were slightly slower, but their number of crashes and number of issues and like users getting logged out suddenly and that kind of stuff, those unexpected issues from when they were writing their game servers in C++, which is what a lot of game servers are written in because that's just the stack that's existed for 30 years. They drastically reduced, and it was like less than 10% of what they were having before. I'd have to go look up the article to see the actual numbers, but it was super small numbers, massive improvement on user experience, on number of crashes, on fault tolerance, obviously, the concurrency, all of that stuff. And it was working amazing for them to have it written in Elixir.
Well, what's really cool too is we're just starting to dive into like we're building our first like multiplayer game server, right? So we're slowly moving in that direction and we're learning a lot about this stuff. And like one thing I just want to, before we move on from this article, I think it's funny. So a couple months ago, they distributed an update client version with debug code in it. This additional code caused each connected user to constantly ping the server every 100 milliseconds, even if not in multiplayer mode. This caused their traffic to increase 1,000 times. They only discovered this increase 2 weeks later when they saw the CPU usage in their Elixir server went from 5% to 21%. Once they found out the once they found out the root cause and how the system handled it, they realized they didn't have to rush a client update or to remove the debug code. They just chose to maintain their regular release cycle and fix it at, on their normal scheduled updates.
Nice.
Like,
Well, and
that's awesome.
one, that's amazing. Two, I just remembered hot swapping is another major feature of
Yes,
Phoenix.
you don't have
And
downtime.
that's something with game servers, that's a huge thing. Because if you go look at any MMO, you've got like World of Warcraft does it. I think back when I was playing, it was every Tuesday. And Elder Scrolls Online does it, and Final Fantasy 14 does it. Any major MMO has this period that's blocked out for, hey, we need to do server maintenance and restart everything and shut down the system, start it back up. And so the game is just not available for this window of time. And like World of Warcraft does it on a rolling basis. So they've got this long list of servers and they start at the top, they turn that one off, turn it back on, then move to the next one, turn it off, turn it back on. And that's not so much a problem with Elixir. Like, yes, you might have some database issues and stuff with Postgres that maybe you need to have some kind of maintenance window. But as far as the actual processes go, you could have a backup database and all that stuff, and there are ways to manage that issue. But the process itself, you don't have to stop it.
Yeah.
You just say, hey, I'm going to update this crap, and users will see a sudden change.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And like more in that article, they're like, we're well aware that hot reload is a thing. We have just chosen to have two servers to switch between, so we don't have downtime. And it was just like basically they called it like, they just picked the lower cost because it was basically what their engineers knew how to do.
Yeah.
So, and they don't have any issues even doing it that way.
Yeah. And what's crazy to me is a lot of the reason that Elixir hasn't been adopted as much is because it's not as battle tested as Node.js. And like we were saying with the whole Bleacher Report thing, people just aren't as comfortable with it on a more senior level. But there are so many advantages to it that it's crazy to me that more people haven't picked it up and started working it into their systems and updating things and moving on. Because I think this is a much better way, from my experience, this is a much better way of doing everything on the backend side. And it results in much lower costs. There are a whole lot of benefits, the concurrency, the fault tolerance, we've said that 500 times. But all of those benefits that come with Phoenix solve a lot of problems that exist in the programming world where we have all these fancy algorithms. And it's like I said in our last episode, on the front end side of things, there's a new web framework every week that is there to solve a problem. And maybe if we have to come up with a new web framework every week to solve problems, we're doing it wrong. And the internet as a whole, the more you learn about how the internet functions, the more terrified of the internet you get. Because like even even the guaranteed packets, I'm brain farting and I think it's TCP. Maybe it's not. But anyways, there are guaranteed packets and there's not guaranteed packets, and it has to do with sockets and updates and all that stuff. But even the guaranteed ones, there's a delivery rate of like 20%. And it's a lot of these really fragile systems exist, and Elixir helps to offset those. And I feel like it's the next natural step in progression of building a better web, building better servers. Like these guys found with their multiplayer game, that would cost them to build it in existing battle-tested frameworks and stuff to run their servers at the level that they are. It would cost them a lot of money.
Dude, they have one server in North America for 10,000 users.
Yeah.
Well, and
and
what's
it's not even close to being fully utilized.
and then they also said, as far as like scaling goes, what they do to scale for like other countries is they just pop up a server nearby, wherever the load is. So really, that's very inexpensive. If you just need a server per country or like a region with that you map out, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, for real. And so it's just, I feel like it's a better way. That's why we use Elixir.
And
It's just
also,
better.
TCP provides guaranteed delivery of packets.
Yes. Okay. So I was correct.
Yes.
Okay. UDP. That's the other one. There we go.
Yes.
My brain's working again. TCP is the guaranteed, UDP is the not guaranteed. And UDP is what's typically used in game development because it gives you the current state, where TCP is more like streaming service stuff where it's, I need the packets in order so that my movie plays right.
Mm-hmm.
And UDP, it's, I don't give a flying flip what happened last. I need to know what's currently going on.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, there's a little nugget for you. But Elixir helps manage a lot of that stuff. It helps make things a lot more scalable, a lot more secure. You don't have to worry about nearly as much. And what's crazy to me is a lot of people that I've talked to about Elixir in the past see it as, well, that's a niche, fancy thing for when you have a giant business. But really, the people it serves best, like, yes, it's absolutely great for giant businesses and Bleacher Report and Warner Brothers and blah, 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 whoever wants to use it. But it's really, really, really beneficial for startups.
Yeah.
Because one of the biggest expensive, we've worked with a lot of startups. We've built a couple startups. One of the biggest expenses is hosting costs.
Yep.
And no matter how much you do it, the hosting ends up biting you. And as your server utilization goes up, it ends up biting you. And Elixir saves you a lot of those costs.
Yeah, I am going to look up right now what pricing is on DigitalOcean for 16 gigs of RAM. What else did they say?
I don't remember, and I don't have the article pulled up.
I have it pulled up. Life. 16 gigs of RAM. Okay. 8 core machine. All right. So let's see. 16 gigs of RAM, 8 core machine. That is $96 a month. And they're using 5% of it.
Yep.
So that's pretty freaking cheap.
So
guys.
that $96 a month is going to last them for a long time.
Yeah. Isn't that wild? That's wild. I think that's cool. Like, HGA has their own server, and it's definitely oversized. I want to say we have like 4 gigs of RAM, probably like 2 cores, and we're like $24 a month, maybe.
Yeah.
And
that's, when we're doing client work, that's one of the biggest benefits of us versus like, hey, I found this rando online, is because we're using Elixir and because we're utilizing the power of Phoenix and all this stuff, especially with LiveView, we don't have to have 2 separate apps. For example, a lot of hosting services, DigitalOcean included, have options for, hey, I want to deploy an app. And that app is really easy to set up. It gets its own dedicated space. But for a traditional, hey, I've got a Svelte app and then I want to have a backend of some sort, you have 2 separate apps running. And yes, you can manage that by doing all your own stuff and rolling up your own version of Ubuntu or Debian or whatever you want to use.
mm-hmm.
But
and then you have to know how to do reverse proxy setup and all that good stuff. You need to do
and it can be a major
Nginx.
pain in the butt. And even though I know how to do that stuff, it's still a pain in the butt. And so you end up with a whole lot of maintenance fees and a whole lot of, like, especially for companies that will charge that for developers, you end up with a lot of extra fees to manage this system. with LiveView, we can pop up one of those Linux systems, or we can just deploy an app, and you have one app and you're done. That's it.
Yep.
And it's super low hosting fees because the utilization is so low and it's so efficient that you don't need a crazy powerful dedicated, like having dedicated CPU power and RAM and all that stuff, a dedicated system. You can really utilize like the shared systems and all that stuff because you're not going to need all of that power. And so over time, you're saving, you know, 50 to $100 a month on hosting fees.
Yep. So, I mean, you're saving more than 50 to $100 a month.
Well, yeah, I was just throwing out a nice, easy, I can prove this number.
Yeah. I mean, if that doesn't convince you that having Elixir in your stack isn't sexy, I don't know what will. But if you can't code, at least build your stack in Elixir so you're at least partially sexy. Dude, I don't know. Elixir just excites me. Like, it's fun. It's cool. Writing it is fun. And then just the performance of it when you like see the capabilities and read articles like this X-Plane article, just how amazing that it performs.
Yeah, for sure.
So with that being said, if you want to learn Elixir, head over to Elixir Mentor on YouTube. If you don't want to learn Elixir, but you have an app idea or a startup that you want to build and you want someone to do it for you, reach out to us at HGA, Hired Gun Apps, and we build everything in Elixir unless there's a reason that we can't. And I think, yeah, if you want awesome web tech stack, hit us up. And I don't know, I think that's a good episode, Ben. Is there anything else you want to add? Do you want to say that your week in LiveView is the sexiest week of your life?
I mean, it's not the sexiest week of my life, but it is a lot better for web development.
He's lying.
No. I love that we are moving to purely Elixir for the web stuff and Rust where we need it.
Mm-hmm.
It makes my heart happy. And I feel strongly about using modern stacks and modern technologies and moving forward instead of, hey, this is the tried and true because everybody's doing it and everybody has the same problems. And I love that Elixir is so clean, easy to read, easy to use. It's got all these fantastic benefits. And I would strongly recommend that if you haven't at least checked it out, if you're a developer, do so. And if you're looking to build a new project, absolutely check it out and see if it's a good fit.
Yeah. You can save a lot of money in the long term for sure. Especially just with a lot of headaches server
because
costs.
JavaScript sucks.
JavaScript does suck.
If you disagree, fight me.
Well, and like the biggest problem too with a lot of JavaScript projects is you follow a pattern that will no longer suit your needs in the future, and you end up dumping all your code and rewriting everything, and that can be costly as well.
Oh, it's a major cost.
But it is there. Like if you're a tech company, you are going to be rewriting your project a couple times. It's just kind of like how things go. But
it's the nature of the beast.
Nature of the beast. But all right, cool guys.
Same language, then if we have to rewrite it in Phoenix, then at least we still have the parts and pieces there.
Yeah, I mean, like I implemented a blog system. I don't know, what would you call it? It renders markup, and I even have an admin portal for creating blog posts in a half a day of work.
Yep.
So the speed you can iterate and release new features on in the, I don't want to say it, PETL stack is amazing. We'll call it Elixir stack. But all right, guys, thanks a lot. Thanks to everyone that tuned in, and we'll see you guys in 2 weeks.